All right, we did a video a week or so ago where we tried to narrow each conference down to like 4 teams that we thought had a legitimate shot to win it. And that was an interesting video, and y'all had some great comments on that one. I want to do something different today. I want to talk about some long shot teams, Cinderella teams, out of the blue teams, whatever you want to call them. I'm starting to get a lot of questions about, what do you think there could be any surprise teams this year? Sort of like maybe a TCU from a couple of years ago, or whatever surprise team that kind of makes a run at a conference title. And I've got some thoughts on this. Let's start with let's start in the Big 12. I guess in order to do a video like this, you have to kind of eliminate some teams first. So, like, if a team is the betting favorite or in the top 2 or 3 of the betting favorites to win a conference, it can't really be a surprise team. So, I mean, teams like Utah, Arizona, Oklahoma State, these are some of the teams that are sort of at or near the top in terms of betting odds of winning the Big 12. So I'm sort of eliminating those from this list. Those would be more like from the last video, kind of obvious choices. But what about some surprise teams, out of the blue teams that could potentially make a run and you could see maybe winning the Big 12? We got to start with the obvious. Colorado. Obviously, I'm kidding. Colorado's not winning the Big 12. It would be out of the blue if they did. Now, not to the Deion stands. They think they're going 100-0 again. But, no, I'm just kidding about Colorado. Kansas State. I think Kansas State, well-coached team. I love their coaching staff. I really like the way that quarterback looked in the bowl game. He'll be the starter next year. They've always got a pretty good team. Could be, maybe they put it together this year, make a run at the Big 12. Texas Tech is another one. Again, I like the coach. I like the coaching staff. Now, I've been a little bit hesitant to sort of go in on Texas Tech or go all in on Texas Tech this season because I was all the way in on Texas Tech last season. I did pick Texas to actually win the Big 12 and make the playoffs, which ended up happening. But I had Texas playing Texas Tech in the Big 12 title game. I thought Texas Tech was going to have a big year last year, and they did not. In fact, they disappointed. Is it possible I was a year early on that? Maybe. I don't know. So maybe you talk about a team like a Texas Tech, so Kansas State, Texas Tech. West Virginia took a massive, huge. They were one of the most improved teams in the country last year, year over year. Is there any way they continue that? If they take if all they need is another couple of wins over what they got last year, and they've got a real possibility of finding themselves in the hunt to make the Big 12 championship game at the end of the year. Now, I'm a little bit more hesitant on a team like West Virginia than some of the other teams maybe I mentioned because of the coaching staff. I love Kansas State's coaching staff, Texas Tech's coaching staff, some of the other teams in the Big 12 as well. With West Virginia, it's the opposite. I do not like Neil Brown. I don't think he's a great head coach. I think West Virginia probably needs to go in a different direction. They had a couple of terrible years under Neil Brown, and it was widely considered that he was going to get fired after last year because people thought West Virginia was going to be terrible last year. And they're like, that'll be it for him. He'll be gone. And then they come out and they start winning games. I think they finished with, eight wins, something like that. So then West Virginia couldn't fire him. And I actually think that in the long run, that's a negative for West Virginia. I think there's a better chance West Virginia regresses a little in 2024 than I do that they win the Big 12 title. So I probably wouldn't include them on this list. I guess I'm going to go with like Kansas State and Texas Tech. Moving on to the Big 10. Now, this one will be interesting here because when you talk about the Big 10, it's really like the 3 teams that from what used to be the Big 10 East, Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State, right? All of which are going to be in everybody's top 15 heading into next season. And then you've got Oregon joining the Big 10, who is also very highly ranked in all of the preseason polls and rankings. So when you start looking at the last video I made where what are some obvious choices to win the Big 12 or who would, the best 4 chances to win the Big 12, those are the 4 you talk about, really. Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, and Oregon. And I had comments on the last video like, there's no way Penn State wins it. They can't beat Michigan or Ohio State. Well, they're in that group, though. That's what I'm saying, one of those 4. But outside of that, I mean, you got Southern Cal coming in. I'm not expecting much from Southern Cal. I mean, Caleb Williams has been the only thing keeping that team's head above water the last 2 seasons. He's gone, one of the worst defenses year in and year out. We've been over that with Lincoln Riley. I know what he says. I know about the coaching changes he's made, but he's done all this and said all this before and then put the same defensive product out on the field. So Would it be a surprise if Southern Cal won the Big Ten? Yes. Am I going to put them in this video as a team that I could see making a run to win the Big Ten? No, I don't have any faith in it. I'm sorry, I don't. Washington, really good last year, made the title game. Lost a ton of talent to the NFL. Adunze, Penix, the quarterback, the entire coaching staff gone. Hard for me to imagine them being as good as they were last year, so I can't put them on the list either. But what about Nebraska or Wisconsin? Now, these are two, again, this is long shots, okay? This isn't necessarily anything I expect to happen. We're talking about long shots here. But with Nebraska and Wisconsin in particular, both have proven over time that they can put good teams on the field, teams that can compete for and win conference championships. Both teams have a coaching staff heading into year 2, right? You see a lot of improvement across the board, generally speaking. It's not always the case, but generally speaking, you see a lot of improvement with a team and a coaching staff from year 1 to year 2. And with these particular coaching staffs, both have a ton of experience. Matt Rule, especially at Nebraska, has Power 5 experience. Fickell at Wisconsin. He was in the group of 5 at Cincinnati, but we all saw what he was able to do there. These are two schools that have proven over time, in Nebraska's case, not all that recently, but have proven over time that they're capable of putting 9, 10 win or greater teams on the field in any given year. Again, I'm not predicting that this will happen. We're talking about surprise teams here. But Nebraska loaded up in the transfer portal. Wisconsin still got a talented roster, and I still like Luke Fickell and that coaching staff he's got up there. So in the Big Ten, I would probably peg those two as potential surprise teams that maybe could figure into the Big Ten title race. Although, again, not predicting that. The whole point of this video is long shots. Let's move over to the ACC. Now, in the ACC, there's a team that, for me anyway, that's going to cross over from one of my 4 that's got the best chance to win it and a 4 surprising, and that's Virginia Tech. When I made that video about the 4 teams that I think can win each conference, I put Virginia Tech in there. I do think Virginia Tech is one of the 4 teams that has a legitimate shot to win the ACC. However, from a national perspective, the perception of the ACC, Virginia is not in sort of the consensus top 4. They haven't been good in a long, long time. And overall last year, their record's not great. So unless you were really paying attention to what's going on at Virginia Tech, you wouldn't really have a reason to even notice them. But they won 6 of their last 9 games. They returned their entire coaching staff. Almost everybody on that team who produced any production at all, offensively or defensively, is back again next year. And they're in the ACC. The schedule's just not that hard inside of the ACC. As far as teams you want to eliminate from this conversation because they're not long shots, that, of course, would be mainly Clemson and Florida State. No one would be surprised to see either of those 2 teams win the ACC. I think you can probably exclude NC State as well. They're ranked inside the top 20 and even inside the top 15 in a lot of preseason rankings. Another team that's got a lot coming back with an experienced coaching staff. So while not very many people might be predicting NC State to actually win the ACC, I don't really think you can include NC State in a video about potential surprise teams because, again, they're ranked inside the top 15 or 20 in every preseason ranking we've seen. Miami is the one that's sort of on the bubble to me between should this be one of the 4 teams we expect could win it, or should this be one of the 4 teams that would be a huge surprise if they did? It might be both. Again, Miami, young coaching staff. Cristobal's now has been there a few years. The talent level is getting higher and higher and higher every single year. They've got a lot of parts and pieces returning. They played a lot of talented true freshmen last year who gained a ton of experience that they now can use to be that much better this coming up season. They're in the ACC. Again, just not very many hurdles to jump over. I think that, if you're being objective, Miami, I think, has a legitimate shot. But, which may lead you to say, well, they don't need to be in a video about long shots. I get that point, and I guess I'm kind of stepping on my own toes here, but in this video, because I kind of agree with both sides, but they've also been in the ACC for 20 years and never won it. I personally am going to be surprised if at any point Miami wins the ACC. It's hard to remember. And if you're younger than 30 years old, you probably don't remember. But when Miami joined the ACC, It was a foregone conclusion. People just said, well, it's going to be Miami or Florida State winning the ACC every single year. And while it's not unexpected that Miami hasn't won the ACC every single year, it's extremely odd that they've never won it, ever. Not once. Not a single time. So I personally am going to be surprised and shocked at whatever year they eventually win the ACC, if they ever do win the ACC. So I'm going to put Miami, Virginia Tech. I had somebody on the call-in show mention North Carolina. I'm sorry. I am so off the North Carolina train, I couldn't even possibly put it into words, but I'll try. They hired Mack Brown. I feel like that gave North Carolina a sort of a shot in the arm, a nitrous boost. They bring back a former coach in Mack Brown, who, while he was gone, won a national title at Texas. There was a lot of hype and hoopla surrounding Mack Brown's return to North Carolina. That showed in the recruiting rankings immediately over the next couple of years. They immediately started recruiting better. Then they get Drake May, Heisman candidate, monster numbers, plays like a video game guy, can run around, can make all the throws. And nothing ever happened. It never materialized. The defense was terrible, or they couldn't run the ball, or this guy would get hurt, or whatever the case. It never came to be. And I look at North Carolina now without Drake May, on the tail end now of Mack Brown's second stint as head coach at North Carolina. This guy's not getting any younger. He's not going to be there much longer. It feels like North Carolina had a window of opportunity in a period of time where Clemson has been down, the team that's dominated the ACC for most of the last decade. It seemed primed for a North Carolina run for an ACC title or more. It didn't happen. And now Drake May's gone. I think the defense is still pretty bad. Mack Brown is way down the backside now of the overall mountain of his coaching career. I can't put any trust or faith in North Carolina to win the ACC, so I'm not including them. Wake Forest, no. The other Virginia team, no. And then you have the Northeastern teams, Pitt, Boston College, Syracuse. I don't trust any of them, none of them. You'll find some people every offseason that want to hype Pitt up. You'll find some that want to hype Boston College up. You rarely find any that want to hype Syracuse up, although, they've got some fresh blood there too, hiring a brand new head coach, bringing a lot in through the transfer portal. I do think Syracuse will be a better team going forward than what they've been the last 4 or 5 years. I don't think they're in a position to challenge to win the ACC. So I guess I'm going to go with Virginia Tech, maybe Miami, as potential surprise teams in the ACC. And then we get to the SEC, and to me, this is the hardest one, and I'm going to tell you why. I think there's 4, 5, 6 teams that when you start talking to people about, hey, who could win the SEC this year, who could play in the SEC title game this year, which would be 2 teams, which SEC teams do you think have potential to make the playoffs? I feel like there are 4, 5, or 6 teams, depending on who you're talking to, that people name immediately right away without having to think about it. In my mind, if you're talking about a team being a potential playoff team, there's no way it can then be a surprise if they win their conference, okay? So that eliminates, in my mind, these 4, 5, 6 teams, whatever it is, from being discussed in a video like this one where we're talking about surprise teams. So who are those teams? Well, Georgia, Texas, Bama, Ole Miss, Missouri, and Tennessee. Now that leaves out LSU, and I'll be honest with you, you can really group that list into a couple of different. You got Alabama or you got Georgia and Texas. I think that I know they're the 2 favorites to win the conference. After that, you've got like Bama, Ole Miss. After that, you've got kind of your Tennessee, Mizzou, maybe LSU. Is it going to be a surprise if any of those teams win the SEC? Is it going to be a surprise? To me, the most obvious choice for a surprise team would be an Oklahoma. And that's probably it. That's probably it. There is no way, 0, that Florida wins the SEC, that South Carolina wins the SEC, Kentucky, Arkansas, Mississippi State. I don't think Texas A&M's got a chance. Auburn, no chance. It's hard for me to find a out of the blue team I think has a chance to win the SEC because, like I said, like a lot of people are going to say Tennessee, Ole Miss, Missouri. Okay, I hear you, but Ole Miss and Missouri are ranked in the top 10 of almost every preseason ranking. You can't look at a team that's ranked in the top 10 and then pretend to be surprised if they win their conference. Tennessee ranked in the top 15 or 20, depending on everywhere that. Tennessee and LSU are pretty. I guess we can include Tennessee and LSU as teams that it would be a surprise. We talked about being surprised anytime Miami would win the ACC because they've been in there for 20 years and haven't won it. Well, in the case of Tennessee, they haven't won the SEC in 26 years, 24 years. What is it? 24 years. 1998. No, it is 26 years. Jeez, time flies when you're losing, don't it, Valtar? And LSU, to me, when I look at LSU, like, yeah, they're really talented every single year. Brian Kelly's proven he can win a lot of games. Now, never any big games, at least in the postseason, but he's proven he can win a lot of games. And LSU's always got a lot of talent. Here's my issue with LSU in terms of actually picking them to compete or win the SEC. Their defense was absolutely horrible last year. In fact, it was so bad, I don't think it can be fixed in 1 year. Not to the level that it would need to be fixed in order for them to win the SEC. I'm not saying LSU's defense can't get better. Of course LSU's defense can get better. It can't get any worse. I don't think it can get good enough in 1 year to get them where they need to be to win the SEC. Combine that with the fact that the only thing they had last year was Jaden Daniels and a couple of NFL wide receivers. They're gone. Jaden Daniels won the Heisman Trophy. I like Nussmeier. Nussmeier's a great pocket passer. He can sit in the pocket and sling the ball. He's a gunslinger. There's no question about it. He's not Jaden Daniels. He's not going to give you what Jaden Daniels gave. So it's just hard for me to imagine when I look at what LSU was last year and what they would need to be to win the SEC, I don't see it. So maybe you can include LSU in a conversation like this, a potential surprise team to make a run at the SEC. And maybe you can include Tennessee, LSU and Tennessee, because it's just been so long for Tennessee. And Tennessee doesn't have an easy schedule. They got to go to Georgia. They host Bama. They got to go to Oklahoma. Talked about NC State a few minutes ago in the ACC. They got to play NC State early in the year. And then the rest of their conference schedule on top of that. So I guess maybe LSU and Tennessee would be some surprise teams to make a run at the SEC. But again, some people include them in their list of 4 teams that could win the SEC. So the SEC was hard to me. But anyway, there you go. Let me know where I'm wrong down below. Have a good morning.